The Spin-Off Podcast Network.
Raising capital or taking your business to the world? Investment Fix has everything you need to make it happen. This season, we're exploring the US market, the opportunities it offers, what it takes to grow a business there, and the best way to approach investors. The Investment Fix podcast. Tune in today.
The Fold is brought to you by oOh!media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. Nau mai, hoki mai ki a The Fold. E mihi nei, ko Duncan Grieve toko ingoa. Sound the alarm, this is an emergency monopod. News broke, I'm going to say 90 minutes ago, that the project, Three's sort of flagship 7 p.m. hybrid of current affairs and entertainment, is under consultation. We know what that means. That means that there's a formal process to go through, but the project will not be returning to Three's slate in 2024. Got to give credit where it's due. The story was broken by the media insider himself. Shane had a very solid piece of reporting about, based on an email sent out by Sarah Bristow, who is herself the outgoing head of news at News Hub, announcing the process. So Sarah Bristow, outgoing head of news at News Hub, sent an email around to staff. I'll just read a section of that because this sort of sets up how the news landed for those involved. She wrote, "The project has served News Hub and Three incredibly well since its commission back in 2017. However, audience behaviour has changed dramatically since that time. This year, we've discussed at length why we are transitioning our broadcast business to a digitally led operating model, and the transformation of our newsroom is equally crucial as we move away from a model that is centred around linear broadcasting and programme deadlines to one that is more responsive to audience needs across the day. We've been reviewing all our areas of our business to reimagine what our on-air news offering would look like if we were to build it again from the ground up. The focus being to capture digital audiences and drive online engagement as we have successfully done with Paddy Gower Has Issues. There are no proposed format changes to other News Hub shows." That's quite important to hear for those, first and foremost, this is, for us, this is a fascinating, probably quite a sad media story, but for 24 people, this is their jobs and livelihoods, and I just want to give my thoughts and go out to them because these are invariably very hard times. But it is good to hear in a time when there is a lot going on. The fact that they definitively said there are no proposed formats changes to other News Hub shows means that at least it is contained to the project. So I've got a few points I want to hit at around this. The first is to say, I don't think this is really about the project itself, or rather it is, but in a very sort of specific and defined way. And the way I can sort of prove that out in a way is the most recent ratings I have to hand. These are for election week, so they're inflated to some extent, but there is a relationship rating, which I think is worth paying attention to. So these are 25 to 54. That's broadly speaking, the demographic targeted by Three, and they call that the commercially important demographic. There's household shoppers, people who are earning money and spending money more so than demographics either side of that. So the average number of people watching News Hub at 6 p.m. was 85,000. The project retained 70,000 of those. So, whereas on TVNZ1's, the 6 p.m. bulletin, the average rating was, the average number of people watching was 150,000, and 7 Sharp retained 98,000 of those. So you see that basically as a proportion, the project retained roughly 80% of what News Hub at 6 p.m. was drawing, and that number drops to a little less, more like 65%, around 2/3 for 7 Sharp in its relationship with the 6 p.m. TVNZ1 bulletin. Why does that matter? I mean, the whole point of 7 p.m. is to hold ratings and deliver them into that sort of 7:30 to 9:30 prime time block, which is sort of contested programming, the stuff that changes month to month. So if you basically can see that the project, by holding a larger percentage of what News Hub at 6 p.m. was able to draw, it was doing a better job of keeping people who were there for the news sticking around so that they might be fought over at 7:30 p.m. On that basis, it was succeeding more so than 7 Sharp was succeeding, even though 7 Sharp vastly outrates it, particularly in 5+. And that's where I think it's worth drilling in a little bit to what the 7 p.m. current affairs show is for a network. Like I said, it's about holding audience, delivering audience. TV stations make the vast bulk of their income between 6 p.m. And 10:30 p.m. And so that's why it was such a massive deal a few years ago, probably more than a few years ago now, old ass man, when 3 lost Home and Away, because that was considered such a reliable lead into the 6 p.m. news, and the whole sort of machine started cranking up at that point. And that's why the chase and the fact that it's such a phenomenal rater, delivering audiences into 6 p.m. for TVNZ, which then flow out into 7 Sharp and then the rest of the evening slate is so crucial to TVNZ. It's why Shortland Street could even conceivably start losing money, but because it draws audiences into TVNZ2, and then it kind of helps float the rest of the evening. And it's instructive to me that Shortland Street, which was this absolute powerhouse in the same area as, they target the same demographic, broadly speaking, TVNZ2 and 3. And for a long time, Shortland Street was just this absolute beast that couldn't be beaten. Right now, they more or less get the same ratings in that demographic. I think that's sort of worth noting as a way of showing that the project has actually performed really, really well. So fundamentally, what is it about? It's about money. Like the project is an expensive show to make. It has 24 staff. That's probably incredibly lean for a typical 7 p.m. show. I know, for example, that The Daily Show, which was a late night show on a not particularly popular channel, had over 100 staff making, functionally an identical show, like a half-hour nightly current affairs-ish show. So that's just how lean things run in New Zealand. But they might well be thinking, okay, if we reformat this a bit, we can make it with fewer people. But the biggest part of it is the project is a format that was developed in Australia, came out of Carl Rove's company, and the license fee to that is, the rumours I've heard are that it's at least 7 figures. It might well be considerably more than that. So if you look across the entirety of 3's outgoing expenses, and every media company right now is suffering. The ad market is super soft. Everyone will be looking at what's a big chunk of revenue that we can save without necessarily overly impacting the income we make. And I think that license fee is the one thing that has ultimately led to this happening. It's just it's just too big to bear at the sort of more modest scale of revenues that the TV industry is moving into now. And what will be really interesting to see what News Hub do with this slot. I think that reference that Sarah Bristow makes in that email to being a digital first organization and thinking about content that works as well, or if not primarily well, in digital formats, and then can be repackaged for different formats. That is the archetypal playbook of the digitally transformed media organization. It's something that some news organizations in New Zealand have executed better than others. Probably and that's on some level, there are some formats which naturally suit it, or you can gain revenue from more easily than others. I think probably the print news organizations are furthest ahead. I think NZME most of all by converting not just to making its news product available digitally first and then packaged up for its print news product, but also the fact that its revenues are now far less reliant on advertising than some of the other news organisations. In fact, I'd say probably all of the other scale news organisations in the country, the obvious exception of RNZ. So 3 is looking, and the fact that it's cited Paddy Gower has issues, that's just a person who, whether it's on TikTok or Instagram, any kind of video forward platform, is, his stuff pops. So they'll be looking to create something that has a similar kind of electricity to it. Whether, could it be built around Paddy? Who knows? It might well be. But I guess the main thing is that seems very genuinely to be where that sort of shift, what the thinking is underlying it is, let's not come up with a new 7 p.m. format. Let's come up with a way of delivering and packaging news and entertainment for digital platforms that naturally also lends itself to being wrapped and packaged in a different way for a 7 p.m. audience. And that's a devilishly tricky thing to pull off, but it is also, on some level, if you can create the financial case for that, then you're close to cracking it. That's really what you need to figure out as a modern media organization. I mean, yeah. So look, there's a few different pieces to it. This also, represents a kind of victory for TVNZ. It moved to this format, this kind of more entertainment-driven 7 p.m. show. Like 20 years ago, we had 3 current affairs shows playing live at 7 p.m. You had Close Up on TVNZ, you had Campbell Live on 3, you had Holmes on Prime. And that was a relatively brief period, but it showed you, A, just how heavily contested the area was, but B, that it was considered crucial to a channel to have, like a serious grown-up channel, to have like a show where the major news makers were interviewed, held to account in long-form interviews that you can't blink. That just doesn't exist anymore, and that I genuinely think is a real it still feels to me like a real hole in our landscape in terms of television. I don't think that it's coming back. Whatever 3 come up with, I can't imagine that it'll be that. You still get those interviews, they just happen in different places, like in Tao and on Q&A and News Hub Nation and so on. So there was a shift, and it was, the first to move was TVNZ when it created 7 Sharp, which was a fairly naked jack of the project's format. It's less so now. It's more developed into its own thing. 3 held the line first with Campbell Live. That was shut down in this quite brutal and ongoing kind of bloodletting way through the Save Campbell Live campaign, and it got up to some quite staggering ratings by the end. Then was replaced weirdly by Come Dine With Me, RIP. That was a complete aside, but that was an exceptional New Zealand version of a reality show that, because it went into the spot previously occupied by Save Campbell Live, was really not well received. And then there was a show called Story, which almost represented a hybrid of the 2 sort of eras. It was fronted by, I think, Duncan Garner and Heather Duplessis-Allen. They did interviews. They were a bit sharper and pricklier and faster, but it still had some of that element, but it also had people out on location doing 2 or 3 minute zany packages where they were on a Segway or something. That lasted maybe a year and a half, and it just wasn't rating particularly well. There was still a lot of kind of residual resentment, I think, over the way that Campbell Live fell away. And it wasn't until the project came along that 3 really got its answer there. another aside, super self-indulgent, but I actually auditioned for the project, and it was such an interesting process. You know, there were like 20 people. I was the only one who wasn't famous. Everyone else was really good at their jobs, and I was like terrible. It was a particularly low time for me. I had like a major shoulder issue and these sort of facial sores that felt connected to them. So it really didn't look much like television or even radio at that point. But they asked me. I was very grateful to be asked, and humoured me for a couple of auditions. The role, you know, there were people like, I probably shouldn't say who else was involved because, you know, obviously they didn't get the part, but, you know, really big names. And the role ultimately went to Jesse Mulligan, who's still there now, done a fantastic job. But you could see the amount of care and energy and the kinds of people they were looking at. None of them, apart from me, would have come cheap. And, you know, like that again sort of illustrates just how important this thing is. Now that process begins again. I think the project's been a fantastic show. I do want to mahito all of them who made it. Like, they have worked incredibly hard on it. They persevered. It was a bit sort of rickety, the hybrid of news and entertainment. I think it's actually, if anything, dialed up the news or the way or the pace of the connection to meaningful current affairs moments in recent years. It's just got a lot more confident in its voice, and this is not on them. Like I say, this is just a pure cost-saving mechanism, and the fact of having to do it, that just tells you a lot about where the media is at right now. You know, if you're paying attention, there's a PwC report that says that there are material concerns that MediaWorks might not be able to meet its obligations. That's code for is in a pretty shaky financial position. TVNZ has let go of one of its 2 drama commissioners. Like, there are signs everywhere that the big players in this business are doing it really tough, and this is the latest and in some ways the most visceral because it's a 7 p.m. product with all these stars on it. But like I say, I think it's really important to understand it in the context of this is a financial decision. This is by no means about the performance of anyone on or off screen in that show who've I think done an exemplary job, and the data bears that out. Something new will rise in its place. I really think that News Hub is a pretty incredible part of the 3 and Warner Brothers Discovery operation. It has a really distinctive voice and culture. It has it's always had this underdog mentality. It knows exactly who it is and who its audience is and how it speaks to them. They will come back from this. They'll figure out a new product. But you cannot deny that the signs for the media more broadly are pretty bad right now. You've got an incoming government that's a lot less interested in media. We'll see how that plays out. But really sad day for those who work on the project and those who've enjoyed it. Hopefully that's provided a bit of context from me. So that was another monopod on the fold. Ka kite. That was The Fold, brought to you by our partners at oOh!media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. Huge thanks to oOh!media for sponsoring this episode of The Fold and enabling us to make unmissable connections with Kiwis.
Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today.
The Spin-off Podcast Network.